you, Ed, and look forward to this evening's program. Friends, appreciate you joining us. This was a long weekend, and those who have joined us, thank you very much for joining in. My name's Rajiv Jain. I've been a score mentor for about 7 years. After I finished my career with the corporate America and in consulting for 45 years. I joined SCORE, and it's been a very rewarding journey ever since, basically helping entrepreneurs succeed and grow. So, as we go through this presentation, please ask questions. In terms of my background on turning around businesses and looking at businesses. I've worked with corporations that have had divisions that were not doing well and required turning around. I've worked with venture capitalists that had portfolio of companies that were not doing well and wanted them to grow. And I've also been with a industrial development bank that had a large portfolio of companies they had invested in. And if their businesses were not doing well, then they asked me to work with the leadership in those companies and help them turn around. So I bring a lot of experience and would love to share it with you. So please do keep your questions coming and as we go along. Excuse me. So let's start with what all do we cover today? Oh, why are we not going down? All right. So, in terms of the content for today, we'll look at the statistics that talk about survival rate of small businesses. We'll also talk about the size of the business and whether it matters whether you're small or large, where you're located, etc. In terms of your success, we'll take a lot of lessons from companies that have been in trouble and returned to profitability or went into trouble and did not come back, and we no longer have them with us. We'll talk about a lot of warning signs, financial and non financial. And as entrepreneurs, you're close to your businesses, you will know things that you need to look for as you move forward. We would finally come down to some important performance measures that serve as great red flags that you should watch, and then some key takeaways. And finally, we'll have a Q&A at the end, but as Ed said, you can ask questions anytime or put them in the chat box, and we will respond to them appropriately. So let's start with the survival rate of businesses. Um, this is not to discourage people from getting into business. Uh, eh, Matt just told he is going to have a program where they're talking about starting the business today. Well, everybody should start it and go for it. But the reality is, 1 out of 4 small businesses fail in the first year. So hopefully, we can help you be part of the 3 out of the 4 that survive and do well. But the road doesn't get any easier after the first year. The statistics from US Bureau of Labor statistics tell us half the businesses will not hit the 5 year mark, and only 1/3 of the businesses that start today will hit the 10-year mark. So the road is rough, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be part of the success stories. If we look at businesses in terms of does it matter what kind of business you are in and where you're located? The highest success rate for businesses is in the manufacturing side, and professional services has one of the lower rates. So 30% of the professional services survive, while 43% survive in the manufacturing side. If you look at geographic uh, location, Washington State has the lowest success rate. Only 60% of the businesses survive the first year, while California, 18% of the businesses fail. So 80 plus businesses survive in California. Illinois, Midwest is about the average, which is about 35%. 75% would survive the first years. So we are in a better place from that point of view. Um, I want to start going down the red flags with a story about one of my own um experiences. And I'll take a case study of a company that was repairing and overhauling aircraft components. And I want to take you through, what were the red flags that we saw, how the red flags turned out as we investigated them, and how the company turned around eventually. See, I think that'll be helpful for the audience to get a feel for how the information gets used in practical terms. This company, they used to repair and overhaul components for aircrafts. It's very similar to us going into a garage and for taking our car there for repair and services. Except that in case of aircraft, the aircraft would not come. The airlines would take the component and send them in. And the second big difference was while we can get spares fairly easily for the automotive industry, in aircraft industry, it can be anything from 3 months to 3 years if you have to order the OEM parts from the airlines. But looking at the business, uh, we receive the order. The first thing that happens, next, the engineers actually review the product that's come in and find out what's the problem. They prepare an estimate based on spares that would be required to fix it. The estimate goes to the salesperson who gets an approval for the customer. They schedule once the approval is received, the job is scheduled, parts are ordered from the inventory, goes to the shop floor, and then once it's completed, they test it to make sure it's met all the compliance requirements. And then, of course, the back office takes care of the billing and uh, and collection of monies thereafter. So what had happened was when I was as a divisional CFO, a corporate CFO called me and he says, Rajiv, I need you to go and actually look at another division, which which was this division which was supposed to generate a lot of money because it's a service business, not too many issues. Pricing was based on whatever repair was required. And all of a sudden, for the last 6 months, it just stopped generating money. So the red flag for them was where's the money gone? What was interesting was the company or this division was actually generating more revenue. So it wasn't as if the sales had gone, the sales were going up and up and up. But on the other side, there was no cash coming in. And the second major red flag that was there was the turnaround time for the job to be completed used to be 30 days. So when we contracted with the customer, we said, hey, yeah, we'll get that stuff back to you in 30 days. But that time had gone up from 30 to 120 days. So the customers were not feeling happy. But these were the two red flags that started the whole investigation. So once we went in there, we started looking at what's what's going on. And as we looked at the revenue stream, the customer revenue was growing from the existing customers. We were growing number of customers. And the number of components that were coming in were also growing. But you see, the challenges with the growing number of customers was that the new customers were all based outside US and Canada. So they were in foreign countries where the credit risk was high and the longer pay times were involved because those people were not interested in paying in 30 days. So even though our contract says that, you pay in 30 days, the typical time was 90 days. And you'll be surprised that some of the countries, the payment times or credit terms are even longer. So that's what was eating up the cash that even though the revenue was going up, we found the customer base that was growing was taking a lot more investment into the receivable. The other issue that we found was as the number of components were growing, uh, we did not have the capability in that division to actually fix them. So that required skills training for the engineers, certification that they can do the job. You need technical drawings, you need spares inventory for those items, and you need test equipment. So all of a sudden, there was a lot more investment required. There was the cost of servicing had gone up, and that was starting to eat into the cash flow as well. And as we went along, we next talked to the engineering department and see what they had to say. So the engineering department was very happy. They said, "Oh, we got a great variety of products that we are doing here, so it's not as mundane as it used to be. We love to have a greater variety." But on the other hand, they needed technical drawings for those new products. Uh, I'll come back to the next point, which was basically because you did not have, um, the product was not getting out as in time. The customers were getting dissatisfied, and because we did not have internal capability to repair these products, we had to find somebody outside to actually repair it, which was again extending time. And till you'd know how much it'll cost from the third party, you could not give customer an estimate to when the work would be done. So initial reaction was, hey, why don't we stop all this new components coming in? You know, if that's what's causing the problem and all the delays, let's not bring these products in. Now, what do you think the sales rep would say? Um, Anybody in the audience who would like to take a guess? If you said, "Hey, just go to the customer and say, we don't do these things. Send these to somebody else. We are not interested."
Anybody want to comment on that? You could just raise your hand. Okay, I don't think anybody wants to comment, Richie, which, oh, wait a minute. Well, somebody said they're going elsewhere for business. See what else.
Well, well said. Yeah, it says so. The salespeople said, "Hey, guys, if we let our customers take some of their products and go somewhere else for business, they might take the product they send us here that we do also to the other person. The customer is looking for their convenience. So it is easy to say we will not do this work, but we risk losing the customer totally." And after a lot of discussion with the sales team, the answer was no, we cannot tell the customer to go elsewhere because otherwise we'll lose all the business that they have because somebody else will take that business and say we'll figure it out. There was a third problem that was there, which was with the inventory. So these people had a very nice inventory system that would do all the forecasting. But if you have not been receiving these products for repair in the past, there is no history in the inventory system to order spares. So when these things landed, there was no spares inventory in house that could allow us to repair them. So we thought, oh, well, we can go to a competitor and buy the inventory from them for spares. Well, one, they would not necessarily be willing to sell that to us. Two, if they did, after great persuasion, they wanted a much higher price. The OEMs is the obvious place to go, but the OEMs in the airline industry take 3 months to 3 years to give you spares. So that really is not a short-term solution. It can be a long-term solution that you place an order, but then the product is sitting there on the floor. And the last option that the engineers thought of at that point in time was they would take a good part and then take the spares out of that one and then replace it, which meant they had to do extra work and then repair that part again to fix the unit that was from which they took out the spares. So all in all, the cost was going up and the cash flow was down and our time turnaround time actually went downhill. So the point of sharing this with you is the the red flags that were there seemed very easy that oh this should be a fairly simple fix. But as you start peeling the onion, you find there are a lot more issues, and it's not just one issue. It is a series of issues that hits you, and as a management, you have a lot of options. Which way do you go? So the end result was of the whole analysis was okay, yeah, we now have a higher operating cost. Our profitability is also going down. Our turnaround days have gone up from 30 to 120 days. Customers dissatisfied. There's more rework time, which increases the cost. Our investment receivables has gone up, and the cash cycle has become elongated. So do look for the red flags because they will identify the problems in the company that are happening. And these are very helpful in because if you can take timely action, things can be turned around before they become a pandemic within the company and the customers start leaving. The last thing you want is the customer to leave. Any questions at this point in time?
Let me take a look at the chat box. No, just the comments on what customers would do. I think everybody's absorbing your lesson here, Rajiv. So I think you could move on.
All right. Well, so just to wrap this up before we move forward, the solution that was identified, excuse me, was to keep the customers. What we did was we identified a process where if a customer sent a component that we did not do internally, we would outsource it. It took us about 90 days to find third party vendors and third party repair facilities that could do that work equally well at the same quality we wanted. So it took us a little time to find that, but we decided it was not worth the time and effort for internally for us to start doing all these additional components. And the whole thing got settled in about it took about 6 months to turn it around. But at the end of it, we found a solution where we could keep the customer as well as increase our revenues, and everybody was happy. Next, I would just want to talk about, you know, companies that saw the red flags and did not take action. And, and a lot of these names you probably would recognize. Um, Pan Am was the biggest airline in the world. Uh, Very well known, did everything right at one point in time. Eventually, they sort of became complacent. They ignored the competition, and finally, operational inefficiencies set in. And in 1991, they closed doors. Another one that name you would recognize, Blockbuster Video Rental. Uh, they were again the largest video rental chain in the country, but failed to see that the revenue was declining. In fact, before Netflix came along, there was another business that was started by McDonald's called the Redbox. And Redbox put up kiosks for video rentals at all the stores, grocery stores, etc., so that whenever you went for grocery shopping, you could actually go there and get your DVD rental at that time itself. Uh, They must have seen the revenues reducing, but did not take action. Uh, and then Netflix came along and said, "Hey, you don't even have to go to the store. I can just give it to you at home." And they started the subscription service where they would mail the DVDs to people at their home, and finally came streaming. So Blockbuster just totally missed the whole concept of, the business was changing, technology was coming in, and they did not change, and they finally failed. The next one, Kodak, again, a global leader in photography. Um, they were into, uh, the digital technology took them over. But what's interesting is they were the first to come up with digital photography. Their first digital camera was developed by Kodak, but the management saw the potential for it and said, "Hey, if we go digital, then what about all this business that we have internally, which is based on films?" And they saw a destruction of their existing business by going digital. So they said, "Okay, we're not going to go after digital. We will stick with our film technology." And eventually, the competition took on the digital. And eventually, in 2012, Kodak again filed for bankruptcy and lost the business and had to go digital anyway. Toys R Us, they they were trying to create stores that where they could have, children could have a good experience, and their parents would come in, let children play there, and children would ask for the toys. But the whole business was changing to online shopping, and parents stopped coming to the stores, and finally they again missed the business changes that were happening in that industry. I can go into Sears into details. Again, Sears was not close to the customer. Uh, there were just so many such examples of companies that were successful, were around for hundreds of years. It wasn't that they started yesterday. They had the best of the management teams, they had the technology, they just did not heed to the changing environment. They did not take the red flags seriously and thought they could just surpass them. If you look at, the whole, look, in the retail industry, of course, online has been Lord and Taylor, Pier One Imports, Fry's Electronics, Payless Shoes, Radio Shack, Borders Bookstore, CompUSA, our own Marshall Fields. All these companies were around for decades and decades, and they are no longer there. Again, the problem was they ignored the red flags that were there and decided not to take the right action. So, very critical as an entrepreneur to be, to be aware of what's going on in your business. Let's talk about a few of the success stories that have been there. So, companies that went downhill, but management did take some action. And we'll talk about what kind of actions they took so that they were able to actually come out of their problems once they realized what happened. And you might be surprised to see on the top is Apple. Uh, Apple in the early 90s actually fired Steve Jobs. They had come up with a product called Lisa that was totally unsuccessful, and their board decided Steve Jobs was the wrong person at that time. And then they went along for a few years and then actually rehired Steve Jobs in 1997 to lead the company. But when Steve Jobs came back, he did not run the company the way it was before. He changed the whole company. Previously, Apple was a computer technology company. He de emphasized computer technology. He realized that was becoming more of a commodity product. margins were small. So he went into iPod, iPad, um, iPhones. These were all products, and these products, he said, the strength of the company lied in being close to the customer, understanding the customer well. What was the customer looking for? Because a lot of these products did not have a huge demand when it started, but the customers started liking the products because of the convenience that they offered. And Apple technology from there has grown on and on and on, coming up with innovative products. And today it's one of the largest companies in the, on the in the world. But it took him to one recognize that the product line that they had was not right, was not going to sustain itself, and find the talent internally of what the company could do to actually turn around and bring up different set of products. The same thing is with Marvel Entertainment. If you know Marvel, that was the largest company in comics, and people stopped reading comic books, and Marvel's revenue started declining. As it went down and down and down, Marvel had to come up with what is our out, and they looked inside the company to say, what is our strength? What is it that we really do well? And they decided, okay, it is the characters, the cartoon characters we have. They are popular. People recognize them. And they changed their business model from comics to actually creating films and movies. And Marvel Entertainment went into the movie business, totally changed their business model and product, and then they have done very well ever since. Delta Airlines actually went down in 2005. I think they filed for bankruptcy again. Costs were too high. They were not they were not attentive uh, to the warning signals. And after filing, they restructured the whole company and started focusing more on the customer service. And today, Delta Airlines is known for its customer service uh, operations, and probably considered the best of the American airlines that are there. Uh, I'll skip Lego and talk about IBM a little bit. Uh, Again, another iconic brand for for US. In fact, for that matter, worldwide. There was a saying at one time: if you bought IBM technology, you were never fired, because they were the best. In the 60s and 70s, there was the IBM 360 and the IBM 370 computers, um, and they were the top of the computing. Uh, there really was no competition to them. They were huge computers, required a air conditioned room to be built around them. They had floating floors with water underneath to keep it cool. You needed RF protection against the computing and so the cost of actually having a computer was high in terms of the infrastructure it needed, but they were the best and the fastest at that time. Come 1980s, there was this small company called DEC, and DEC came up with what it was at that time known as the mini computer and the microcomputer. These computers cost tens of thousands compared to millions that one would pay for the IBM 360s and IBM 370s. And these small computers did not require any of this environmental uh, place for keeping the computers. You could put them in a normal room and they would function. So the installation cost and the operational cost of those computers are much, much lower. you could distribute them all over the country as opposed to having one main one in one place. So Dick Waxes became very, very popular, and that was the start of the downfall for IBM. As time went along, IBM took a long time because whole company was centered around hardware and making these large computers. They tried to diversify, if some of you may remember, into what's called the Global Business Group. And that was the group that it was a division of IBM that started getting into office products. They were starting to make photocopiers, dictation equipment. They were making electric typewriters, and that was a big success for them. But the revenue from all those things was much smaller than the loss they were having from the lack of sales of the main product line. So it took almost a decade for them to turn around. Uh, Fortunately, they had enough cash in the main, with them, but they finally changed. They said, okay, hardware is not where the future is. And they changed their whole strategy to software and services. And hardware got actually downgraded in their whole priority. And today it's back again, a leading uh, IT company in the software and services. And they have gone into the high end computing, where they've got the IBM Watson machine that's supercomputers. They've gotten to AI and the likes at this point in time. But that was a long turnaround. So each of these companies, I can go through the other ones that are listed here in terms of their history, but the the lessons that come out is when the six signs were there, the warning signs were there, the management had to look for those signs and then say, hey, what do I need to do um, to get off this situation? Because many times it required really to reinvent the company. They change the product line, change the service lines. But if that's what has to be done, it has to be done. Um, I'll probably share with you one company that we all knew about in cell phones, BlackBerry. At one time, every company in US had BlackBerry for the executive, and today I don't think anyone has them. What happened? Well, BlackBerry sat on their laurels being the number one company in terms of iPhones or the smartphones, and they just did not keep up with the changing technology. And when iPhone came out, then they were in trouble. But the company still exists. BlackBerry is still around. It's a Canadian company. And they had to say, okay, what do we do? Do we just close down or do we find something else to do? And they found they had a lot of technology, patented technology. And today it's more of they have then licensed out their patents. And that's how they actually work today. They don't manufacture any of the products anymore, but their patents that they had with them, those are licensed out and it's still surviving. So here we go on, the list of all the things that were there. Um, any questions there at this point in time?
Let me take a look here if this is a question. Huh, interesting. Hey, John Handler, would you like to unmute yourself if you're still with us here? Yes, you are, John. You want to talk about your experience with a restaurant? John, do you want to unmute yourself? let's see, this was John Handler. Well, I guess John left. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Next person.
Can
Oh,
you
go
hear me
ahead.
all right now?
Go ahead, John. Go ahead. Yes.
All right. No, I just I always when I see a lot of these numbers about I work. I'm a business advisor for small businesses, and I see these numbers about business failure rates, and I kind of question the numbers because as I described, I started a restaurant 25 years ago, and after 5 years, I had a lot of investors that weren't really active, so I decided to close the company, stop that company, and I opened a new company with different shareholders, and went on for another 20 years. But my question was, I would imagine that the business, labor statistics would say that my first company failed, but yet it really is continuing to thrive. And so I kind of question all the failure rates. And then someone else, brought up a good point. A lot of people register businesses and don't really do much with them. So they're not necessarily. My point is, it's not as tragic out there as your graphs show. Um, that not that many, it's not as many. There's a lot of businesses fail because they just not sure. They don't know what they're doing or got into something they didn't realize. Um, but anyway, that's kind of my point about it. And the
Sure,
other
John.
point was with I turned around a coffee shop group and merged it with another coffee shop group, and so you would and they're still going, and you would say that my first group failed, after 2 years, but actually didn't. It got merged.
Sure. No, and that happens a number of times. If especially if the first group doesn't have enough cash or time to turn around, which is required, then usually the best strategy is to merge it with, say, somebody else, and to let it go. And I take your point about statistics. Those are the statistics put out by the, U.S. Department of Labor, and yeah, they may not be the most accurate ones, but that's, I'm just sharing that with you, what they have to say. Um, and, the actual experiences may be quite different from,
Hmm.
for individuals, and they vary by industry and, um, where you're located.
Yeah, and so I just kind of want to make that point about it's not as quite as tragic as it sounds. So go open a business.
Point taken. Point taken. Yeah.
Anyway, that was my point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. How about Destiny Warmack? Destiny, you've got a really good question. Destiny, if you could.
Yes, I'm still here. Thank you for taking my
Great.
question.
Sure.
Um, I put in there, is the goal to be the change agent? Because we know that, the only thing constant is change, right? And so are we pushing to be the change agent? And then if so, how do we manage the pushback? Because literally I'm one of my clients right now, they're having a lot of trouble getting their current just staff, team members, customers to adopt very specifically. They host events. And so you have to register for the events. And so now I'm pushing them to an online digital platform to register the events. I've had to limit it to one ticket per session because you would get someone that goes in and put their email in for 5, 6, 12 of their friends and family and not register their names, not register their email addresses or even their physical addresses. And so we keep having these difficult conversations about, hey, it's one ticket per registration. And like, how do you manage that?
true. Now, this is registration for an event.
Yes, it's registration for an event. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess the registration software would somewhere have to check that it will only allow one registration per person, and with each registration you would either have to put in a name or an email address, and it checks if that thing has been put in earlier, that they say, hey, you're already registered. Um, so there are software that would check, if there's a registration by that email address already, and then just, but if you wanted to, use different email addresses and put different people, more than one person, uh, there's nothing you can stop, no way to stop that um, registration.
So I guess my question is like, how do you advocate for that? Because I mean, there's workarounds. You can put a dummy email in, but at the I've limited registration to one ticket per session, but we still circle back to the same question every single time. Oh, I'm registering this for a guest. Is there a workaround? And so the real question is, how do you advocate? How do you be that change agent and communicate the value in these new systems?
I think it's probably a subject to, maybe we can take it offline and discuss this in more detail, because I think it's something one needs to think about. What is the system that you're using, and how, what checks and balances it has, and is it a
Mhm,
matter of adding some checks and balances in the software that's registering the people? So
mhm.
maybe we can take that offline.
Yes.
Super.
Sure.
And I'll
Okay.
explain how you can get a hold of Rajiv. You can ask for him as a mentor if you'd like. Uh,
Okay.
so he can help you one-on-one with that, Destiny.
Thank
But
you.
very good question. Very good question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent question, Stephanie.
Yeah, good. All right, Rajiv, you want to go back to your presentation and then we'll do
Okay.
Q&A?
All right. So while we're talking about these things, like, sometimes people have asked me, okay, Rajiv, isn't there a magic formula that tells me um, how am I doing? And there's a professor at NYU in the Stern Business School, Professor Altman, and he developed what's called the Altman Z score. And I share that with you here. And this is what the original formula is, the one that's there right there in the top, 1.A plus 1.4 times B plus 3.3 times C plus zero point 0.6 times D plus 1 times E. That he developed. And he developed this primarily for, at that time, public companies. And when he looked at this, he tested this on all the public companies and found it stood true in terms of, if the formula gave a score of 1.8 or less, those companies folded up in the next 2 years. If the formula resulted in a score of 3 or greater, they were in the safe zone. And the idea was for companies to use this formula quarterly or half yearly or yearly and keep tracking themselves. And this was one of the ways they could find out if they were doing well or they were heading towards trouble. Since that time, he has actually modified this formula, because this original formula was done for our public companies. But it's a very simple formula, and you can still use it to test, uh, your company, how it's doing. He has come up with another formula, which is there at the bottom of the page, which was meant for private companies, because the first one was intended for public companies, and the scale changed slightly. So the gray area is now 1.3 to 2.9 for private companies. And it's one way for somebody to test themselves. Hey, where am I? Um, am I in the risk area? Am I in the safe zone? Or am I in the gray area and I need to do something? So it's just another way of testing oneself. Most of the credit companies actually use this formula today, for credit ratings, etc. I took an example of a company and try and compute here. I'm not going to go through all the numbers here, but effectively, when you computed this particular company came out be at the score of 1.84, and 1.84 means you are at the lower end of the gray scale. Red flag, look at it, your company, what is it doing right, what it's doing wrong. The idea of the red flags is more as a warning sign. Please look, it's like when we go to a doctor and say, okay, well, we've got a headache or we've got cough and cold. It's many times it is a sign of something deeper, and one needs to investigate it further. So let's talk about some of the warning signs that are of financial nature. The first one is a negative cash flow. Now, this was a sign that my company leadership had looked at when they asked me to investigate the other division, that the cash flow should have been positive, but it was coming out negative. In my experience, cash flow is probably a stronger um, uh, sign than profit margins. You can still manage profit margins and profits of a company, but cash flow, if you don't have money in the bank and you end up having trouble paying your employees the next month, that's much more detrimental. So negative cash flow is something to look at. Um, there are companies that will look, I don't know, entrepreneurs, how much, how often they look at cash flow, but it's something that should be looked at almost daily. Um, you may see variations, that's fine. You may have projected a cash flow and it's up or down, but understanding why your cash flow is up or down is critical. It's probably one of the most critical red flags that are there. Declining profit margins is the next one I would say. If your profit margin declining, that means either you're purchasing higher, your costs are running higher, and it's short term, you'll be able to take that on, but long term, what is it that's happening? Are your prices going down? Or is your competition coming in and you're having to reduce your margins? It is a matter of understanding why your profit margins are down. Increased accounts receivable. Um, following Keeping a track of accounts receivable is very important. It links in with the cash flow, but more importantly, if your customers are taking to pay you, it'll impact you. It's free credit for them, but it impacts you in terms of your own cash flow. And there's a report that's called the aging report in accounts receivable. And if you start seeing the age of the receivables sliding back, from 30 days, it's going to 60 days to 90 days. That's a sign of, for some reason, customers are not paying you. So either the product they're receiving or service they're receiving, they're not happy with it, there's a disputes involved, you need to investigate that. Decrease in inventory turns. I'm assuming people understand inventory turns. Inventory turns are how many times you turn your inventory in a year. So let's say if your revenue is $1 million and you hold inventory of $100,000, fully it is 10 times you are turning the inventory um, in the year. The more you turn the inventory, the better you are running the company. If the inventory turns start to go up, that means you're holding more inventory and it's not generating the revenue that you are expecting. So look at that. Late payments to suppliers in particular. If you're having to delay payments and you're having to choose which supplier to pay, which not to pay, if your normal terms are 30 days, then you should be able to pay their suppliers in 30 days. Uh, your suppliers are your business partners, so it's not trying to outdo them with the cash, but you need to be able to figure that out. If there are delays, why are you having to delay payments to suppliers? High debt to equity ratio, that's usually a sign of borrowing too much. And if you have high debt to equity ratios, banks will not entertain you. They think you're high risk. So it's a ratio that um, is important to know, especially if you're going to be borrowing from the bank at any point in time. Let's look at some of the non-financial measures. Customer dissatisfaction. Be close to your customer. If the customer will tell you whether he's getting the right product, the right service, if there are any issues. So many of the company examples we saw that failed got distant from the customer. The customer was wanting something else, and they could not understand how to deliver it. Product quality today, product quality is becoming a almost a given. If you want to play in the game, especially with the bigger companies, if you want to supply them, um, your product quality has to be up to the mark. If you're having too many returns, if you're having to rework stuff, that's a red flag. Productivity, you want to continue to improve your productivity internally. Um, if you manufactured 1,000 units last month, this month, try and see if you can manufacture 1,100 units. The more you do that, it helps you bring down your cost. And if that's not happening, or your productivity is going down, then that's going to increase your overall cost of production. The next one is lack of innovation. And I bring this up in many ways because it's very important for companies to continue to innovate. If you have a product today, over a period of time, that product will have competitors, even if you are the leader today. And the better companies actually try and have a measure called how much of my revenue percentage is from new products. So they'll say, okay, I want 10% of my revenue this year to be from new products I introduced, or 25% of my revenue should be from products I introduced in the last 3 years. And that is an important factor in helping you to grow and keep close to the customer. Because if you're not bringing up new products that are helping your customer and keeping your product line current, then that'll be a flag in the future for you because competition is going to take on. Strained supplier relationships, again, need to be close to suppliers because they can strain your business anytime if they're not supplying on time and the right product and of the right quality of product. Employees, declining market share. There was a case of company where the revenue was growing, but the industry was growing at a faster rate. So they thought their 10% revenue growth was great. Unfortunately, their industry was growing at 15%, and they did not recognize that the industry was growing at that rate. And what effectively that meant was they were losing market share as time was going on. So these non-financial measures are important. The entrepreneurs would normally know that what's going on. Um, from they are close enough to the business, and many times they're not looking at the financial reports. Sometimes they may look at them monthly, but if they're not looking at them, they will know or hear about these non-financial measures much more frequently. So they are critical in my mind. Let's talk about some more specific uh, measures and red flags that you can have. Um, Financial measures, cash flow, we talked about profit margin, revenue growth, day sales and receivables, and aging, operational efficiencies, inventory turnover, and inventory aging. If you've got stuff lying from a lot of time and it's not moving in your inventory, you know, is it dead inventory? It's just blocking your cash and space. Uh, Productivity, delivery time. Some of these measures will depend on the business you are in. So they are a little generic and need to be customized to your own business. But to give you the sense of what's important in your business, customer satisfaction. We talked about the new product share, revenue share, employee turnover. If your employees are turning over too fast and you're not able to keep them, then there is an issue. And obviously, employee morale is important for good customer service. Strategic goals. Measuring your performance against budget or whatever your plan was is important just to understand what did you think will happen and why you are not there, um, and whether your goal should be adjusted based on the reality of the business environment. And these reports should be looked at as frequently as one can. Um, the faster you see them, the earlier you will find out where the red flags are. So here are some of the main takeaways I would say from the situation where you're, I would say, one in three business survive. Well, it may not be one in three businesses, it may be more, but one of the lessons is avoid distractions. As an entrepreneur, it's very easy to get distracted into businesses that are not your core business. Um, Also, when you take on new business, let's say you're in retail industry, you sell to retailers, and you sell $1 million worth, and tomorrow Walmart comes and say, "Hey, I need $10 million worth of goods. Can you supply that?" The immediate answer might be yes, but really you need to watch out what that means to your business. How will you supply that? What the impact does it have on your cash flow? Do you have enough money to produce all those goods? So remain focused and avoid distractions, because many times there will be a lot of distractions as you go along. Size of the business is not a factor of success. I think stay close to your customer and the operating environment. If technology is taking over your business, you need to move to technology. It's saying, "Hey, I don't need it," doesn't help. And innovate, even if you are the best. You have to keep up with the competition. Either you are moving up, and if you're not moving up, you're moving down. No business stays stagnant. I would encourage everybody to get reports on early warning signs, financial and non-financial. Some may be daily, some may be weekly, some may be monthly, as appropriate for the business. But look for them. And lastly, don't delay any action when you see the warning signs. Investigate, analyze, and if the business needs to be changed, then take the action that's required to keep you successful. So that's primarily what I had to say. And any questions, any thoughts, anybody would like to share, please do.
Okay, yeah, folks, go ahead and raise your hand, put something in the chat box. I mean, this was really geared to you as checkpoints to you on your business. If you're thinking of starting one, kind of the do's and don'ts, what you should be looking for. You should also be looking, if your existing business, you should be looking at these different metrics that Rajiv talked about and analyzing these on a somewhat regular basis and learning from some of the traps that some of these other businesses have fallen into.